here today.
And thank you. So I was going back through my notes over the years, and one of the things I found was I did a presentation similar to this in Poland back in 2012. And I was asked to make predictions of the market going forward, the outsourcing market in that case. And lo and behold, when I came across it in preparation for this event, 10 out of 10 of those predictions came true. So I wonder how that compares to, say, a Gartner or a Forrester. Now, for this one, since the focus is a little bit different, and I don't profess to have a monopoly on brains, so I reached out to our customers as well to get the buy-side perspective and collected their thoughts and combined them with mine. And here's what we came up with as what we think is going to be shaping the landscape for us going forward. So next slide. Next slide. All right, so here's the obligatory company overview slide. DATAMARK is headquartered in El Paso, Texas, giving us easy access to a large population of bilingual workers. DATAMARK was started back in 1989, which coincidentally is also when I started in the outsourcing industry. And it's about the time the term that business process outsourcing was actually first coined by the market research firm G2 Research, for those of you that are old enough to remember them. We are one of the longest running BPO companies in the US and have several customers who have been with us for more than 2 decades, including our very first customer, FedEx. We're very proud of that relationship. Over the years, we've expanded our presence across the US into Mexico and now also in India. We've multiple locations in each of those countries. We offer a wide variety of BPO services. While we perform most of our services from one of our regional processing centers, but for some customers, we also have an on-site operation at their facilities. So next slide. All right, so the first trend that we're going to be talking about is cloud computing. Now, cloud computing is not new. Most of us know that. I predicted this one 9 years ago, but I predicted back then it would be slow to catch on, which it was. But with the advent of the pandemic, essentially a cloud-based solution became more widely adopted, and for some it was accelerating the inevitable. So, while cyber crime is a problem, it's predicted to have been something in the range of a $2 trillion industries. Cloud computing is one of those ways that companies are using to mitigate against that, because when we went to the work from home environment, suddenly security that we would have had within the firewall of a company was not there, and a lot of other ways for those nasty people to get into our networks and into our systems became possible. So anyway, cloud computing, I think, is going to be on the rise. It will accelerate from the growth that it had before, and you can expect it, if you're a buyer, it's something that you should be looking at for your solutions going forward. And if you're a supplier, it's something that you probably want to consider, at least if you want to get on the short list. The next one would be blockchain. Now, blockchain is not just for Bitcoin. A lot of people have that perspective because most initial uses of the blockchain technology were affiliated with initial coin offerings like Bitcoin and Litecoin and others, and then there's the infrastructure components like Ripple. But back then, 10 years ago, it was like a modern day gold rush. And of course, given the price curve of Bitcoin, certainly looked that way for a while. But as also happens, there was no shortage of scammers. The underlying key to making cryptocurrency possible was the blockchain technology. It's essentially a network of untrusted networks, virtually impenetrable to hackers, not entirely, nothing's perfect, but it's the best thing out there. And it made cryptocurrency safe, at least from a technology perspective. So the people behind the cryptocurrency is different than the technology. So if you're trying to understand where the problems are with cryptocurrency, it's not the technology. So blockchain is an ideal choice when a highly secure computing and communication environment is needed. It has its broader appeal has been due largely to being associated with cryptocurrency, as I mentioned before. But in recent years, other applications have come forward in telecommunications, government, transportation, healthcare, essentially things that require a high degree of security in their execution. So given the explosive cyber crime, as I mentioned earlier, I predict the blockchain-based solutions will become a rapid accelerator in terms of market acceptance. It's been kind of limping along for the last 10 years, but I think going forward, it's going to be a lot more common. Buyers should be looking for it, and suppliers should be preparing for it. Now, work from home is the next option, or the next topic. And work from home is not a novelty or a perk anymore. As a result of the pandemic, anybody seemingly that could work from home did. There are obviously some jobs that can't be done from home. We have all the essential workers, and you can't manufacture a car from home. So there are limitations to what can and what can't be done. But it did force a lot of companies into the realization that not everything has to be done right here in front of me. There's a bit of a trust issue there. So some people or some companies were forced into this model because of the pandemic. And once they were over that initial shock, they found they actually preferred it and have abandoned their traditional corporate digs. But clearly it doesn't work for everyone, like I said. So while companies, or some companies, were migrating in that direction prior to the pandemic, others had to be pushed into it by, in this case, environmental and governmental forces conspiring. And then some are now going back to in-office as the pandemic begins to wind down, at least here in the US. And at DATAMARK last year, we made the shift to continue to serve our customers in a work-from-home environment. And we on a business review recently with a couple of our customers and found that in some cases, work productivity actually went up and quality went up through the pandemic, working from home. So, it's a viable solution, but it's not a panacea. So work from home is not a great situation for instances, for example, with high security and privacy restrictions, HIPAA restrictions and such. So it's not a panacea, but again, it's another solution that we should be looking at as a possibility for the future. So if you're a buyer, you want to have a flexible contract that allows for changes like this. And if you're a supplier, you need to figure it out if it's not part of a natural business model for you. So the next item we have is, on this one, I actually was looking for a response relative to repatriation, the bringing back of work from overseas or nearshore locations. Because prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about it back in the Trump administration about repatriation and, rah, rah, go team America. But as one customer pointed out during this pandemic, that kind of put a halt to a lot of that thinking. And his comment was, I don't see there being a land rush to bring work back to the US. We really think we have things any more under control here in the US, but in keeping it abroad, if it's only in one country, like India, for example, that would give me cause for concern. Not because of India, but even if you have multiple centers in the same geopolitical location, that's not going to work. When the entire country goes into lockdown and you have no ability to shift the work, you're stuck. And to a certain degree, that's turned out to be prophetic, because when I was researching this was a couple of weeks ago, and of course now India is in lockdown, and his prediction of that came to pass. So for buyers, the recommendation is look at companies with multi-country capabilities. If all of their work is being done in one location, even across multiple centers, that might give you something to think about. Suppliers, you need to solve this on your end to stay relevant. So the next one we have is business continuity planning. I always love the movie My Cousin Vinny. And when I was thinking about the comments that I was getting around business continuity planning, this line from the movie came up. You were serious about that? Because for business continuity planners, they comment that there generally doesn't get much attention until there's a crisis. As one business continuity planner stated to me, trying to get management's attention to do scenario planning. And when there's more time and attention spent on what brand of coffee will be served than there is on the planning itself. And the higher up the person in the company is, the worse the problem gets. So I think a lot of us probably can relate to that, even if we're not specifically in planning. But I think business continuity planning is essential. I think they get thrown under the bus too easily, or made the scapegoat for problems. But it's a shared responsibility. Too many executives plan for yesterday, while their planners are trying to prepare for tomorrow. Unfortunately, I think for most companies, it ends up being that they continue to plan in the moment. So for buyers, you really need to kick the tires here with your suppliers. You want to make sure that they can do what you want done ultimately. A longtime industry icon, Denny McGuire, the co-founder of Technology Partners International, once commented, or often commented, if you buy cheap, you get cheap. So when your due diligence didn't spend more than 30 minutes drilling down into the supplier's business continuity plan, don't be surprised when your supplier can't live up to their contract in time of need. So be sure to spend more time here and be prepared to spend a little more money to ensure that your company can continue with minimal disruption. Again, buy cheap, you get cheap. So for suppliers, you need to have more than one slide in the company overview to address your business continuity plan. I found that to be quite common through the years, and I've done over 150 contracts. So the next topic is business process outsourcing. No, business process outsourcing is not new. As I mentioned earlier, it's about 30 years old as a titled practice. It was actually being done well before that, but the term was coined back then. Now, with BPO, the heyday for BPO was back in the 1990s. No longer was outsourcing viewed as being for troubled companies at that time. Now, very successful companies started looking at it. So the suppliers had to infuse technology into their BPO solutions. The phrase of "you're a mess for less" just won't cut it. That was until the 2000s, when labor arbitrage from offshore and nearshore locations tended to offset the need to invest in technology right now. They could continue along doing it the way they were doing it. So as a result of the pandemic, though, companies want solutions now that are less people dependent, for obvious reasons. So technology is coming back into vogue for BPO. Things like AI, RPA, machine learning, and others have been around for 20 years or more. What has been lacking is a solid case studies for any of these technologies with respect to having an ROI. There's a lot of people out there on the bleeding edge, and I don't think most companies want to be there. So hopefully, as we go forward, that will start appearing so that people will get more comfortable making those types of investments. But I think overall, BPO will see more technology infused into it as a way to enhance productivity and to mitigate against risk. So for buyers, you want to be looking for ways to re-engineer and rethink how the work is done. And you want innovation in your solution. So don't be overly prescriptive to the supplier. Let them come back to you and give you their best, and you can evaluate it based on that. Suppliers, if you have been holding off on infusing technology, time to get on board. So the next one is the race is on. Outsourcing, whether it's ITO or BPO, has been a steady performer through the years, and it was getting a little lackluster the last decade. But now with the pandemic, what a lot of companies realized is they don't need to be in the office every day to serve customers or to otherwise do their job. So why not outsource the function? So work from home, while it has a lot of its own challenges, it has a lot of problems and risks associated. Let's let the supplier worry about the connectivity, the security, and all that stuff. Why do we want to do that? So I predict there'll be an increase in demand for all forms of outsourcing, some of which haven't even been conceived yet, across nearly every business function. This will create new sub-markets within BPO. So you have like BPO, you have finance and accounting outsourcing, then you have accounts payable, accounts receivable, credit and tax, and so forth. So new processes will be seen that have never been outsourced before. Why? Because they realize they could now. And there's certainly a cost benefit to doing it as well. So from my perspective, I predict that going forward, leaders in the industry, BPO specifically, will be characterized as having growth north of 20%. Anything less, given the current environment, and you're going to be losing market share. Next. I always love this commercial Super Bowl ad that EDS had back in the 1990s, showing cowboys herding 10,000 cats. That really typified the nature of our job. But in today's context, it's really applicable when it comes to governance. Governance is truly the holy grail for successful outsourcing relationships. Your success or failure hinges on the people who are managing that contract, and that's on both the buyer and the supplier side. Because sure, you have a contract, but to manage the relationship with an adversarial mindset is a recipe for failure. So you want to be looking, to be collaborative with your buyer and supplier. But suppliers can meet SLAs and still lose the contract if the person that they have running that contract is abysmal when it comes to managing a relationship with another entity, in this case, the customer. So you have to work as a team. You have to work as one. This is not something that you should be under investing in. This is an area that, again, you should be kicking the tires a little bit deeper. Make sure you're comfortable with the people that will be delivering the service, and as well the people that you're interacting with, and that you have the right access on the buyer side to get things done when they need to get done if decisions have to get made. So for both buyers and sellers, my simple recommendation here is put a rock star in place to manage the relationship, and your contract will probably be successful, assuming the SLAs are being met. So the last one is caveat emptor, buyer beware. But in actuality, it's seller beware too. I view contracts as they should be guidelines with teeth. Contracts need to be flexible so they can adjust over time to accommodate new market streams, workflows, fluctuations in demand. I mentioned earlier that FedEx was our original customer, which means they've been with us for 32 years. And FedEx, if you're out there, thank you very much. We appreciate you. And our relationship has grown over the years. We've expanded the nature of the work we've done. They continue to give us new work. And that's because, again, the people that we have in that environment make the difference. But also because we have a contract in place that allows for us to work together better. So when you're putting your contract terms out there, make sure that you have something in there to allow flexibility for the fact that things like the pandemic, or when I lived in Atlanta, we had a bridge go out on I-85, and that disrupted traffic patterns for months. You never know what cataclysmic event is going to happen. It could be a hurricane, tornado, who knows. Make sure that it's in there. And like any good marriage, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. But if you're really focused on the relationship and what got us into this in the first place, you'll probably be successful down the stream. So there it is, folks. Those are my, in this case, 9 recommendations and predictions of what we can see in the market going forward as a result of the pandemic. It's not necessarily something new. I'm not predicting some new technology, but it's change. It's a fundamental change in how we're going to do business. For some companies, it'll be a short-term effect, and for others, it's going to be much longer lasting. But I think for the outsourcing industry in particular, it's going to be a booming time, but that comes with its own set of risks. So again, kick the tires, make sure that the company that you're going to be doing business with will be there when you need them. So questions?
Thank you so much for that insightful presentation, Thom. That was outstanding. Thank you so much. I do have one comment from the chat, and if you want to speak to it, it's not quite a question, but you might have some insight on the comment. And it does say, I am seeing that investing and buying in hybrid service models is a trend, not an entire outsource, but for certain functions or roles in procurement. Do you have any comments or insight on that?
Yeah, so I think the hybrid models are going to be probably the most popular. It's not going fully outsourced, it's not staying in-house, and it's not doing specifically just work from home. So I think there's going to be a definite growth in that, but every circumstance is different. Not every situation is viable for work from home, just as every circumstance doesn't really mean that an outsourced relationship is the right relationship. You might be able to accomplish the same thing internally with some changes, but you have to do that due diligence, and you have to have an honest evaluation as to the pros and the cons and the return on investment, and from a work from home / hybrid model, what's the right mix? Is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? If it's 80-20, is it 80-20 in favor of an office, or is it 80-20 in favor of work from home? So it's actually more complex than most people at first probably were giving a thought to. And as I mentioned too, with the whole security issue, the requirements to make it work correctly and safely can't be overlooked.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. And then there's another question. So in regard to the cloud computing, it's been my experience that it can be quite difficult to transition people from the paper and pencil environments to cloud computing, which has many benefits that come with it. What is the overall mood now, post-pandemic, or really kind of still in the pandemic, but emerging out? Are you seeing more of a shift away or more of an openness towards cloud computing than you were seeing prior to the pandemic?
Okay, so as I listened to the question, the first half of it sounded like it was more a question of automating processes that were previously done with pen and paper, and that's a decision you'd have to make, whether it's an on-premise solution housed in your own facilities, or if you're doing cloud computing, you go with NetSuite or something. That's just a change you're going to be making, is adopting a new platform, and no different than if you switch platforms. But the question of cloud computing itself, I think what I'm seeing this past year, and what I think will be even more so going forward for anybody that's in the cloud computing world, is that's going to be the preferred model going forward. It'll be easier to get up and running. There'll be fewer issues for the customer when it comes to security and making updates and changes, and but it also comes with typically more standards, meaning more standardization. So you're going to give a little, but you're going to get a little. But the cost benefits and the ease of doing business, the flexibility of doing business, wouldn't matter where your people are at any point in time. So again, it doesn't apply to every circumstance, but I think where it does apply, companies are going to be moving quickly to get there.
I agree. Well, thank you so much. Thom, did you have any closing thoughts? If not, we will go ahead and wrap. Any more questions from the chat? We're a few minutes ahead, but that's okay.
Yep. I have nothing more to add at this point relative to this conversation. But it's always a pleasure to work with the Sourcing Interest Group. We are by far the leader in what they do, and we're proud to be members of the Sourcing Interest Group. And hopefully this presentation gave you some food for thought as to things to consider going forward. And we hope to see you in the market.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you today. It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you for everyone who joined us, and we will see you in the other breakout sessions going on later on today at the summit. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.